Welcome back to another Algebra 2 video. I'm Mr. Hibble. Today we're looking at dividing polynomials. This is one of those things that's a little bit more complicated. We'll look at just some really basic idea for dividing polynomials, and then we'll get into long division. We're going to be learning two methods. This one is long division in this video. The next video we'll get to next week will be synthetic division. Different times that you can utilize synthetic division, but we'll talk about all of that later. First thing we need to discuss is, just what happens when you are dividing simple terms like this? Well, the values, those divide normally, right? 15 divided by 5, that would just give me a value of 3. But we also want to divide the variables. And when you divide variables, what you end up doing is you end up subtracting the exponents. So the 5 minus the 2 ends up giving us x to the third. When you divide variables, you subtract the exponents. So this next one as well, you could take 32, you could divide it by 24. That comes out as a decimal, but what you could do is simplify your fraction as well. Desmos can do that for you if you need. Just press the fraction button, that blue button on the left. Ends up giving us a simplified fraction of 4/3. We also have x to the 6th divided by x cubed, and a lot of people want to say that's x squared, but we're better than that. We know that we're dividing our variables. When you divide variables, you subtract the exponents, and this one does give us x to the 3rd as well. This idea we will be using as we go through an entire long division problem now. Long division has a lot of steps. Okay, this process does take a little while, but we're going to make sure we go through it. We'll show each of the steps and everything. First thing we have to do is we need to set it up. In order to set it up, there is a typo in my notes over here. This should say place the denominator in front. The denominator is what's on bottom of your fraction. Okay, I'm just going to write bottom because I think that's easier for a lot of people to understand. Place the denominator in front. With that being said, we then place the numerator, the top, underneath. Okay, the bottom goes in front, the top goes underneath the long division symbol. If you remember when you were younger, a long division symbol looks something like this. Okay, and with that being said, we take what we're dividing by, and that goes out front, and we take whatever is being divided and we place that underneath. But you need to be careful when you do that. One thing it says over here in our steps is don't forget placeholders. Placeholders are simply when your polynomial is in standard form and you're missing a variable. For example, standard form always takes whatever your largest exponent is and it decreases it by 1 each time. So if I had something like x to the 4th as my leading term, the next term should be x to the 3rd. The exponent goes down 1. Then it should be x to the 2nd. It goes down 1. Then x to the 1st, and then just your constant. Notice the polynomial we have right now is 9x to the 3rd minus x to the 1st. We are missing a term for this. In fact, we are missing the term between the 3rd and the 1st power. That means we are missing an x squared. We do need to include that. When you include a placeholder, what we need to note is that you always use a 0 as its coefficient, the value in front of it. All of our other terms can stay the same, but we did just need to make that change in order to go through this problem correctly. So taking what we ended up determining is our polynomial that goes on the bottom. Okay, so now we have it written out here, 9x cubed plus 0x squared minus x minus 3. Now we can go through these steps. The steps take a little bit of work. The first step is you always divide the first terms. Okay, our first terms would be the 9x cubed and the 3x. We know that the thing that was on top is the 9x cubed, so we're going to divide that by 3x. You can go through your division, figure out what that gives you. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Divide your variables. That means you subtract your exponents, and that gives us x squared. When you do that, you place that result on top of the long division symbol. that goes up here, which is now 3x squared. Once you do that, the next step now says to multiply that term. So we take the 3x squared and we multiply that with whatever was in front. That is the 3x plus 2. We go through that multiplication. We multiply with that entire 3x plus 2. Notice it's in parentheses to show the multiplication. 3 times 3 is 9. X squared times x. Add your exponents together. Distribute one more time. We should get 6x squared. Once you have that value, your next step is now to subtract that from our part that is underneath. But we need to subtract this entire thing. So when I place it underneath to line up my subtraction with the like terms, with the same exponents, I need to subtract this entire red part. So when I do that, it needs to be in parentheses to show the subtraction. To know if you did this process correctly so far, one thing that should happen is your first terms in the subtraction should always be the same. 9x cubed, we have that. What happens then when they're the same is because we're subtracting, they're going to end up canceling out and going away. This next step is where you need to be very careful. What we have is 0 and 6x squared combining together. We are combining them by subtracting. That negative does affect everything on the inside. So that means I have 0 minus 6. That is really what we are combining. So 0 minus the positive 6, then 0 minus 6 is negative 6x squared. And once you've done that step, what you need to do now is repeat those steps until everything has been divided. In order to do that, you drop down the next term, so the negative x comes with, and we just start to repeat. So now I take the first term again, negative 6x squared now. I go back to step 1. It says divide. I divide it by the first term of what's out in front. That's the 3x. Negative 6 divided by 3 is negative 2. X squared divided by x, you're dividing, so you subtract the exponents. That's negative 2x to the first then. Step 2 says place that on top of our symbol. Okay, do you need that little 1 as your exponent? Technically, no, so you can get rid of it if you don't want it. From there, though, step 3 says now take whatever that was, the negative 2x, and it says to multiply that with whatever's out in front. That is the 3x plus 2. Okay, we're multiplying. We have the parentheses to show that. We distribute and figure out what we get. 2 times 3 is 6. X times x. Add the exponents gives me x squared. Distribute again. 2 times 2 gives me the 4. Bring the variable with. Step 3 is done. Step 4 says subtract it now. Again, when we do our subtraction, though, we need it in parentheses because we are subtracting the entire 6x squared and the 4x. Now we can go through that subtraction. Again, check to see if you did this correctly. Whatever the first terms are in the subtraction should cancel. We have negative 6 and negative 6, both x squareds. Those are the same. They will cancel when we subtract. Again, make sure this negative is affecting everything. So I have negative 6 minus negative 6. A negative minus, okay, we have a minus a negative, right? Minus negative. Those two negatives together really means I'm adding. So this is negative 6 plus 6. Yes, that does cancel. But be careful on the second one as well. That minus out front still goes to the negative 4. Again, that's a minus and a negative. When you subtract a negative, that is the same thing as adding. So we are really adding 4x here. Negative 1x plus 4x would give me a positive 3x then. Bring down your next term and repeat. Go through your steps again. Go through your division. 3x now divides whatever is out front, which is also 3x. Those divide to now give us a value of 1. Once we do our division, we place that value on top. We said plus 1 on top, a positive 1 value. Once we have that value of 1, we now say that we multiply that stuff. So I now take the 1 and I multiply it with what's out front, the 3x plus 2. Doing that multiplication, you're just multiplying by 1. That'll give you the same thing. That won't change it. Multiplying by 1 leaves your values the same. But once we do our multiplication, now we subtract. So make sure, again, you're setting up your subtraction in parentheses, where we subtract 3x plus 2. Before you do your subtraction, verify you set it up correct. The first terms are the same. Whenever those first terms are the same, we subtract and they cancel. Negative 3 and the 2 will combine. Those are like terms. But this is negative 3 minus 2. Negative 3 minus 2 gives me a value of negative 5. There is nothing else to divide, so our process is basically done. The only thing we need to note now is what our answer is. So we took 9x to the third minus x minus 3. We divided that by 3x plus 2. Our answer for this polynomial, our answer for this division, we said is whatever was on top. That meant my answer is 3x squared minus 2x plus 1. However, you need to be careful because what we ended up getting at the end was this value right here, this negative 5. We could not divide anymore. There was nothing else to divide. That meant that this negative 5 did not get divided. It meant it still needed to be divided. Well, when that happens, we know that that value is called a remainder. Whenever you have a remainder, you do need to include it in your answer. However, we said it still needs to get divided. It did not get divided yet. So it needs to show that division where you have the 3x plus 2 still dividing it. Now we have our final answer, and we are done with this problem. I hope that helps with long division. I understand there's a lot of steps. It does take some time to get through, but luckily those steps are the same over and over and over. So once you get comfortable with them, the process does go a lot quicker. Thank you for watching. That is our 4.4 video, dividing polynomials using long division. Thanks for watching.